Well, here we are again on a Sunday morning, and it's good to see you. We've only got a few on today, but we're meant to be here, those that are here. It just puts something into my talk here, a movement and a rest. So maybe there's a few people taking that rest. And rightly so, because it's been an interesting week. It's been a cold week for most of us, which is very unexpected. But I've decided to use this beach scene again from my old hometown. A movement and a rest. The tide there is just about fully out, and I've watched the tides for many years there. And as the tide goes out, it stops for not very long, but it stops. Then it comes in, and you're sitting there. There it is in front of you, and it stops again. You can almost see the mark on the rock that it gets up to, and then it stays there for a little bit. Then it goes back. A movement and a rest. And I've based this talk on a couple of different texts. In Mark 6:13:1, and he said unto them, Come ye yourselves apart into a desert place and rest a while. A desert place, well, there's a place in the mind, we know what that's like, but a desert can also be a place of quietness where we can think and also just reflect and do nothing, just be still, as Jesus did many times. Now, we live in a dual world, which is a world of opposites: up, down, hot, cold, happy, sad, war and peace, blessings and challenges, as we only know too well. And we can get battered around into either side of these. And Buddha says, follow the middle path. That's fine. But do we ever, while we're on the physical plane, able to follow that middle path in all sincerity? Because we're up, we're down, and off we go. But if we use our spiritual techniques we've been taught, meditation, contemplation, and prayer, those big highs and lows tend to get a little bit more even. And to me, that's how I see that. And there's a couple of other verses too I'm going to quiz today. Anyway, the thing is, these conditions are great for us because it helps us develop and learn how to be a spirit in this body. And if we can handle God's law here, well, hopefully we're storing up treasures in heaven for when we move on to the next expansion of our consciousness, whatever form that may take. These are the ideal conditions to learn the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faith, meekness, and moderation. Now, Spirit has one thing for us, and that is to express through us. And we are all, you know this one, individual expressions of the one presence and the one power right here, right now. We are that dream. We are it in action. The spiritual laws never change. Spirit is the dream. We are the dream. The poet Rumi wrote, our bones are made from the rocks of the earth. Our flesh is made from the grass, vegetation of the earth. And our blood is made from the waters of the earth. So we're all one. This body is made from everything else that is around us, the trees and everything else. And I did a talk once called Temples and Trees. It got me going. And I'm surrounded by trees where I live, and we are surrounded by beautiful trees here, as you know. In 1 Corinthians 6:19, verse 20, do you know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit? And our body temple in the ancient Essenes writings likens the body to a tree. The trunk of the tree is our spinal column, and the branches and the leaves, flowers and fruit on the tree come into and out of form. And as we know in our gardens, why do some leaves and flowers fall before others? And of course, the agapanthus are out everywhere, and I've got heaps of them up where I am. And the first one came out about 4 or 5 weeks ago. And I usually acknowledge that for some reason. I think, welcome, you're the first. And that is still standing there, but some of the others have been knocked around. And it was with great pain that I had to sort of pull one out that it had just bent over in the wind, and you could see that there's no energy getting through the rest of it. I put it onto a stake, but it didn't help. So I had to put that aside. And then the roses. If you're in the right place, the roses are blooming all the time. But if the wind comes to them, they get knocked around. So it says there, consider the lilies. They don't stress or strain, but if they're in the wrong place, like us, we get knocked around. Now, most holy scriptures and cultures and religions have their own versions of the creation story, not just us. In Unity New Thought, we study metaphysically the Bible, and we don't take it literally as some people do. I was delighted, we've been talking about this amongst some of the Unity leaders, and Lorraine was there yesterday when we talked about this sort of stuff, that the metaphysical approach to the Bible is a wonderful approach. And I mentioned that I think it was about 25 years ago I discovered this, brought up in the traditional Sunday school. I read all those parables, but there comes a time when they don't mean much physically, but metaphysically they do. And Catherine Ponder's books, which are still down there, they explain the stories. All those wonderful parables, there is another side to it. A parable has an inner meaning and an outer meaning. The whole of the Bible has, and there are some people who say that the Bible has about 7 different layers of meaning. I remember this woman once, she did a wonderful talk on this, and she certainly opened our eyes to the fact that, yes, but that could mean that, and that could mean this. But this is the days before we recorded messages and had podcasts and things, so I think that lady would well and truly have passed on now. But the wisdom is still there if I wanted to find it. The Bible, as we know, is symbolic of our progress. All those characters, weird and wonderful, are all part of us at certain stages of our development. Let's look at a few metaphysical symbol meanings of the book of Genesis. The Garden of Eden. Now, Eden symbolizes the elemental life and the intelligence placed at the disposal of humankind. God gave us every good thing to use, and we were told to take dominion. Well, we certainly did, didn't we? And look what we've done. Some brilliant creations and the complete opposite. And our physical body, with its physical, spiritual attributes, is a typical mini Garden of Eden. Like any garden, our body needs attending and looking after in the right way. If neglected, we are cast out of this garden into our own heaven and hell states of mind, mentally and physically, by our own misguided thinking. We don't want to realize that we are basically responsible for our own conditions and thinking. It's easier to blame it up on someone else. But in the long run, we have to do what it said in Genesis, take dominion. We return to this garden when we cooperate with the universal divine law, when we think and act as our Creator thinks and acts. Now, we are just the custodians of this power, and we didn't create the power, but we are given free will to use it as we are in our training as mini gods. And there's a way that we learn this here in this mystery school of Mother Earth. There are 2 famous trees in the Garden of Eden. Does anyone know them? Who was that? Yes, yes, that's right. The tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Is the other one the tree of life?
Well done, Jenny. That's it. They're the 2 trees. I'll start with the tree of life. The spirit in us, in whom we live, move, and being, is this tree of life. And we talked about temples and trees. I might do that again sometime. And the ancient Essenes were very much into nature spirits, and each part of the day had its own reverence, like the morning, middle of the day, and the evening. Each had its own set of meditations, and they were adhered to in every possible way. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, well, we're not supposed to say evil here in a Unity church. Error is some of the words we can use, but evil is misplaced energy. We usually use it for good, but if we misplace it wrong, look at the mayhem we cause. And this leads us into the world of duality. We are learning to be God in action. And here in the scripture, God is quoted as saying, "Ye shall die if you eat this fruit." Well, let's take that a bit lighter. We'll just live in misery. We'll live in hell in our thoughts if we don't listen to how we live, move, and being in a line with Spirit. Well, so be it. We don't often appreciate the good things in life until we experience the opposite. And we know what that's like when we experience the opposite of too much of a good thing. Now, Spirit created us as a living soul. The Sanskrit word man means thinker. Genesis 1:27, this surprises some people. So God created man in its own image, male and female created he, them. So much for that, about the superiority of being a bloke. We're all created equal. In this incarnation, we are born male or female, and we have lessons in soul qualities that we have to learn to balance here if we want to move on to expand our consciousness. And we're not talking about gender. That's another story which is really taking the word by storm at the moment. But Adam represents the masculine side of us, the wisdom, the intellect, the get up and go. And Eve represents the feminine, the feeling, and that unconditional love. And we have to balance both of these sides to us, whatever gender we are in. We have the mystical marriage of a balance of the masculine and feminine qualities of soul, regardless of our gender. And somewhere else, I think it was Confucius or somewhere, when the eye is single, my whole body would be full of light. So, and it's interesting because last month's power was faith, and that was in the pineal gland, which is in the center of the, which is in the front of the forehead. And I think it was faith last month. My goodness, how quick we forget. Faith was the power, and the pineal gland, that third eye, is the place in the body of it. In chapter 2, Genesis 1-3, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God ended its work which he had made, and God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he has rested from all his work which God created and made. Now that's a worry if God rested. Anyway, the number 7, it was the seventh day God rested. And he said, take dominion. And as I said before, we are actually the future of God. Deepak Chopra wrote this beautiful book, which maybe Leslie and Jeanette, we can get together and have a look at sometime in the next year. God wants to expand this so that it can be expanded through us. Now, the seventh day. Now, we know there are 7 rainbows, 7 chakras, 7 days of the week, and also 7 notes of the diatonic scale. Would you agree with that, Beverly? 7? Well, I better clarify that first. The number 7, I did write that down. That means in our spiritual studies, it means a completion, like on the 7th day, spiritually and physically, a completion. So later in Gospel of Thomas, Jesus said to his disciples, if they ask you, What is the evidence of your Father in you? Tell them it is motion and rest. So symbolically, God rested on the seventh day. That creative power rested and transferred it to us. So here we are to balance the blessings and challenges of life. Even though we have the power of Spirit flowing through us, we need to look after the physical and mental health of each other to achieve this. In the 12 powers, we study the power of zeal. I remember when we talked about this, I think it was the end of last year, one definition of zeal is enthusiastic, devotion, ardor, especially for a cause we're passionate about. Some of you know the Charles Fillmore revealing word. What was it that Charles said in the mornings when he got up? Something. Who said that? And enthusiasm. That's right. Where is it? All right, we better learn this. I fairly sizzle with zeal and enthusiasm and spring forth with a mighty faith to do the things that ought to be done by me. Oh, for goodness sakes. I say that in the morning. And I won't allow, I think I've said this before, I won't allow myself to say it or think it until I'm ready to do it. So we need the power of the month, which is strength, to do it. Okay, Charles Fillmore writes, zeal is the mighty force that incites the winds, the tides, the storms. It is the urge behind all things. Zeal is the affirmative impulse of existence. Its command is to go forward. And nature, of course, is a wonderful book of spiritual studies. You see this little fern, it's still curled up, and we know that it's going to uncurl and fold out. So, at times we can become overzealous with a project or a cause and not give fair or equal coverage to the rest of us. So we usually suffer one way or another. And the Bible seems to have an answer for everything. Psalm 69, verse 9, the zeal of thy house has eaten me up. Don't we know it? So to conclude, to live consciously with zeal, we need wisdom. And in this way, great things can be achieved. And we know about wisdom. It's not necessarily in the Bible stories. Every metaphysical, every traditional group, whatever culture, has a metaphysical approach to their teachings. Not only the Bible has an inner or outer meaning. So do the other holy books. And Aesop's Fables is one that I refer to occasionally. Zeal, we talked about the tortoise and the hare here a couple of years back. And the tortoise, he was up to the challenge, and the rabbit, was being the year of the rabbit, I'll use that instead of hare, I think it's the same thing, decided he'd accept the challenge. It's going to be pretty easy. I can beat this rabbit easy. And so the tortoise said, okay, I'm sure I can win this. So he watched, because he'd studied the rabbit. He'd taken time. He was a slow creature, but he got there in the end. And of course, the rabbit went this far and thought, I need a rest. So he had a rest, and the tortoise caught up. And you know the rest of the story. By the time the rabbit had his last rest, the tortoise had crossed the line and won. So all these parables have an inner and outer meaning, as we know. And that's the beauty of the metaphysics that we study. And the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary down there is a fantastic book. Not only Unity have a metaphysical dictionary, the others do too, like Swedenborg and some other groups that I've come across over the years. It's based mainly on the Greek or Hebrew word of, say, someone like Joseph or Mary. They get the Hebrew word and they put an interpretation on it. And when I did that course, I think I did the metaphysics course for the Bible, we studied Revelation that way. And it was an eye-opener to see some of the inner meanings of those wonderful, wonderful stories that are in there, and weird symbology, which isn't so weird after all, if you can get the metaphysical grasp of it. So to wind up, this came to me a few years ago by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. It's a well-known saying. He was an old philosopher from way back. A person should hear a little music, read a little poetry, and see fine pictures every day of their life, in order that worldly cares may not obliterate the sense of beauty which God has implanted in the human soul. Now, this was before the internet, before television, before radio. Whereas if we want to do that, we just turn the music on and listen to a song. ABC Classic FM being an example some of us listen to. And if you want to know the news, there it is on your phone, and that is something I'm trying to stop doing. I just got so tired of myself. These headlines are so exciting. Oh, Camilla, disaster. A hat flew off somewhere. And that's how they get us in, and they get our clicks. And so you get more of them, anything you actually were silly enough to read. So we've got to be careful. I look around my place, I think, yes, I'll play a little tune on the piano, not as much as I used to, but it's different now because I'm not doing it professionally. I can sit there and play what I want to play. And it doesn't have to be at concert standard, as we know. You can just enjoy the vibration of the music. And as you say, even music has a rest in it. Our speech has rests. I've stopped, a rest. And if you listen to this song, the whole song is like that. Rest. So the rests are just as important as the rest of it. And as I said before, the number 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All the combinations of that our Western ear is used to. It's just interesting to know that subcultures, we have 7 notes we're used to. The sitar player uses, and the Indian culture uses 12 tones. And it's a different vibe again. So I hope I've given you some insight into a movement and a rest, and I hope you'll all take it easy. I know we look around at our place here and we see all the wonderful things that have been done, like the kitchen, the painting, the pianos, and the screen, and the AV desk. They were all done when everyone was enthusiastic. I think we're going through a phase now where we're all a little bit tired, but the will and zeal is still there. And we know that we'll rise to that occasion as this year comes to us. So I'd like to leave you, right, with something that's very similar. This is what happens. And our animal kingdom is amazing. We can learn from them. This is the power of geese.